Florida has several quarterbacks for a change. The state of Alabama has a normal battle between the two Iron Bowl schools and more with John Garcia here on The Portal.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into The Portal. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst and college football writer. Thank you for making The Portal your first adventure with recruiting, NIL, and the transfer portal each day right here. Today's show is going to feature prospects from Florida, Alabama, a few other different places. But the key here is my good buddy, John Garcia Jr. from Rivals.com, helping us find out what's going on in the world of recruiting. John, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Good to be back on with you.
Yeah. I appreciate you coming on. This is the calm before the storm. Mid-February, right before all the kids take their unofficial visits. For those who don't know, this is quote unquote a dead month with unofficials, which makes it a lot easier for you and me. We don't have to track as many kids, but there's still a lot of rumors, a lot of different things going on. And Ward only knows a ton of kids are dropping lists for who they're going to visit, who's going to be down in their top 5, their top 10, their top 15, whatever it is. So let's start with something that you and I rarely discuss. Quarterbacks in the state of Florida. This is, in my opinion, the best year the state of Florida has ever had at the quarterback position. We have several kids that are probably very well known. I've talked a lot about Darion Coleman. He's committed to Miami. He's a really good kid out of Jones. Noah Grubbs is going to Notre Dame. He's from Lake Mary. There are several, but I want to get to a couple of the kids that are on that cusp that don't get as much respect as they probably should. I mean, we can talk about Diabell and Will Griffin going to Texas and Florida. They're really good too, but we both are kind of intrigued by Michael Clayton, Carter Emanuel, a few of these other kids. John, where are you with them, and why do you think that they're going to be good prospects?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, both of those guys, Clayton and Emmanuel in particular, great frames, kind of no doubter frames when you see them. I mean, Michael Clayton's a legitimate 6'3". He might be pushing 6'4" at this point. I mean, he just has that prototypical quarterback build already off the board and committed to Illinois and a school that latched on to him very early, even as many others bubbled up, before he came off the board. So good early eval by Bielema and company up there. Illinois is doing really well in the Orlando area. I don't know exactly why, but there are several ties, with prospects there. Several are committed to the Illini right now. Kingston Shaw out of the First Academy, one of the more recent ones along the defensive line. And then one of the top receivers in Orlando, Kenyon Austin, recently picked Illinois as well. So big moves in the Big Ten there, and they're going to have a great year on the field, we think, coming up as well. But for Clayton, just prototypical size, big arm. He came down to Rivals camp last year and won QB MVP in a loaded field that included, you mentioned Grubbs, Coleman, Brady Hart was there. Carter Emanuel was there. This was a great quarterback group. Neiman Lawrence included. And look, Clayton had the best day. He was consistent, on time, accurate. When he was on, it looked as natural, as fluid, and as pretty as it gets with the quarterback position. And I think that's really the ceiling. When he is all clicked in, you think of a great jump shooter in basketball. When it's working, man, you can't really slow it down. I think Clayton's got a little bit of that streakiness to him. So obviously you're looking for more consistency, right? Nice year for him as a junior at Sanford Seminole. Obviously a program that is loaded, expects to make a deep run, and they got to make their deep run with MC as QB1 there. So I really like where he is now, looking for more consistency and overall production from him as a senior before he heads up to the Big Ten for good. But he's got the natural arm talent and frame to go play in Big Ten country, which obviously is not easy. I think for Carter Emanuel, a bit of a more unique fit. He's got a great frame, 6'2", 215 or so. He can run a little bit more dynamic with the ball in his hands compared to a Michael Clayton. But his game isn't for everyone. I think it's more of a spread system that wants to put pressure on the defense with a more mobile quarterback. That's the type of scheme that a Carter Emmanuel is going to assimilate to. But he does have plenty of talent, big physical kid, big arm, as you would expect. You would also expect him to be comfortable on the move and off script, and you get a lot of that with his junior tape over at Edgewater High School. I think he had 30 touchdowns as a junior, and that's why the offers are still coming in. Just in the last few weeks, he's added 4 or 5 to his growing list. So a lot of group of 5, not as many P4 in there, but Pitt, UCF, those are some of the schools that have jumped in. So maybe not the type of guy that is number 1 on some of these guys' boards, some of these schools' boards, but one that when you do start to really dig into the tape and the layers and the ceiling, he's kind of one that you like a little bit more every time you do physically see him. So I think he's got a little bit ahead in his recruitment. He's got a little bit more room to grow this offseason, but he needs to put together some performances. And this is in the calendar, this is that critical time for the QB position. So whether it's a guy like Darion Coleman who's looking to go from here to here, or it's a guy who's looking to get into that true Power 4 level, this offseason is going to be critical, whether it's, Under Armour, Rivals Camp, Elite 11, 7-on-7. I mean, there's many avenues and paths towards, hitting that next level, whatever it is at the QB position. So obviously a big few months ahead for all these guys we're talking about.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun because normally we don't talk much about quarterbacks in the Sunshine State. Yep. It's probably their least productive position historically.
And remember, Brady Hart reclasses, right? He was right in the thick of it, among the best, arguably the best in this 26 group. Longtime Michigan commit. We all know what happened there with Bryce Underwood. So a lot of programs started hitting up Brady to think about reconsidering that commitment. And not only does he decommit, he reclasses up to 25. And, of course, he's already on campus now at Texas A&M.
Yeah, that's totally wild, by the way, that he figured out how to do that. But, yeah, this is a great group. And it's also a great group at defensive line. Not that Florida is unknown to that. We've talked about pass rushers in Florida for my entire life. I mean, it's one of the reasons I started following the Big Three in all those games. I mean, number of pass rushers that's come out of the state's incredible. Anybody you want to talk about specifically? I mean, kid at Venice, Charles, or anybody else that maybe somebody doesn't know about, and give a little background.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice edge group in the state of Florida. And kind of like we just talked about with the quarterbacks, you've got your clear-cut guys, right? Your Trenton Hendersons of the world, your Elijah Goldens of the world. If he's an edge, he might be an inside guy down the road. Well, we're still TBD on that one. But you've got your clear group, and then you've got your next tier, right? Not everyone's in that Jake Cruel 40 offer territory at IMG Academy, but that next group is fascinating. Jarius Rogers up at Fleming Island. He just committed to Syracuse, like legitimate 6'5", 6'6", runs incredibly well. He's a deer out there. But we just hadn't seen him a lot. He's up in the northern part of the state. He competes at these Under Armour events once or twice a year, and that's kind of it, but he did increase his production as a junior, jumped on board with the Orange, great early eval. We know that program's, always busy in the state of Florida every December and January, and this year is no different. But Rogers, I think, has a lot to his game. Florida State is in on him. Many other schools are keeping a very close eye on him, and so are we, because I think he's right on that cusp. Ashari Charles is another one at Venice. Got to see him play multiple times last year. You love the motor. You love his overall package. Yes, the sacks are there. He's great off the edge. He looks the part, 6'3", 6'4", 230 pounds or so. But you love the every down value he brings, which is what you would expect from a front seven guy at Venice High School, right? I mean, you're playing, the best of the best, every single week. So I think he's one that, he's a 4-star for us. He's a little on the higher end, maybe compared to some others, but he might still just be scratching the surface on what he's going to be as a pure pass rusher. And it's because he's so well-rounded. Reminds me a little bit of Javion Hilson from last cycle, who ended up at Missouri, ended up as a 5-star for us at Rivals. Just a guy who's just brings it on every down. The motor's there. The pass rushing tool set is there, but you don't necessarily see that finished product on that side. So I think Charles is one who's got a lot of room, to make a potential improvement. And then the one where the production just smacks you in the face, is Cameron Wilson. This is a kid down in Miami, Southridge High School, which is coming off of a great year. They've got several prospects, but he might be the most intriguing on that roster. 20 sacks, 30 TFLs last year as a junior. And he's another wiry guy, kind of like Rodgers, 6'4", 6'5", just over 200 pounds. So he's going to fill out. He's got that speed rush, and he's able to just win with that and that long stride. But as he develops some of these counter moves, I think he's one that is climbing up a lot of boards in very short order. Florida State just offered. He's going to take officials to Minnesota. I think Syracuse is in there as well. This is one where I think if he slow plays it, that offer list is only going to continue to grow. So it's an intriguing time with these edge rushers in Florida, just like the QBs. And look, the showcases are right around the corner, right? We'll be in Orlando Sunday for Under Armour. Under Armour Miami's after that. Rivals Miami at the end of March. So it's a great time for these guys to come out and show why these college coaches are stopping by and dropping scholarship offers left and right.
Yeah, the state of Florida, the best part about it for guys like you and me, they have all the camps. I mean, it's so centrally located. If you live in Central or South Florida, you're going to get to some of them. But that's a great part of it. But we also got to talk about the state of Alabama. The Iron Bowl is a game, but it is a 365-day war, and that includes recruiting. When John and I come back, we're going to talk about several players that, quite frankly, both these teams really want. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now Taxes is easily uploading your forms to TurboTax Expert, who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back, guaranteed. All while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes, Intuit, TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Mr. Garcia, you are no stranger to Auburn and Alabama, as you've covered both directly living in the state of Alabama. You still really enjoy covering the state. I don't know which guy is going to be the biggest battle between the Tide and the Tigers. That's debatable. I would guess Anthony Jones, but maybe it's Cederian Morgan. There's a couple others we could throw in there. The floor is yours. Whichever guys you think are going to be the biggest battles, because I think they're the most fun to cover. Auburn, Alabama, to me, is the best in-state rivalry in the country. What do you got?
Yeah, always fun. And we kind of got a little bit of a year off in that regard.
Yes, we did.
I think the transition from Nick Saban to Kalen DeBoer, and then really coupled with what Hugh Freeze and Auburn had established and been doing in the state, it was kind of a runaway last cycle, right? I mean, Auburn controlled the state of Alabama, and then some of the elites elected to go elsewhere. Zion Grady to Ohio State, Naeem offered to Oregon, but those weren't Iron Bowl battles, right? It was one of the schools involved, not necessarily both. But I do think this 2026 cycle, Brian, as you alluded to, we're going to get a whole lot of classic Iron Bowl battles. I mean, truly, national battles, but we all know it's hard to pull an elite recruit out of the state of Alabama when both schools very much want said recruit. And I think you started right at the top. I mean, with the 5-star guys, Tank Jones out of St. Paul's Episcopal, which has had, a lot of prospects go to both Iron Bowl schools out of Mobile. That's the real war. Premium position guy, a pass rusher who's just freaky off of the edge, one who has been coveted for years by both programs. He's one of the first 2026 recruits, I'm sure, that Hugh Freeze got on board with when he got that job, and ditto for DeBoer, in Tuscaloosa. He's one of the first guys you naturally circle to because he plays that premium position. He comes from Mobile, which is one of the, let's say, more open areas in the state. Typically the metros are linked to one school. Birmingham is obviously linked to Tuscaloosa. It's right down the road. So it's a little bit more Bama heavy there. And then Montgomery, ditto for Auburn, right? Those prospects are a little more likely to lean one way versus the other. Mobile traditionally has been kind of wide open. It's further away from both schools. It's a several-hour drive to get to either school. So there's a little bit more flexibility. I mean, heck, LSU's closer, for some of these recruits than Alabama or Auburn. Nonetheless, you're still in the state of Alabama. And for Tank Jones, I think this is going to be a true war between these two programs. And the buzz has really shifted back and forth, as you would expect for a five-star guy like that. I think 6 months ago, 8 months ago, Auburn really held the buzz. They were really, starting to build the 26 class on an earlier clip relative to Alabama. They grabbed Shadarius Tootle, Hezekiah Harris. They just really started, building in that 26 class while 25 was still being wound down by most others. And that included some buzz for Tank Jones. There was at one point, the feel like, hey, this kid might jump in early. And if he does, it would be with Auburn. But since then, as Alabama has finished 25 and recalibrated for 26, the buzz, I think, has shifted a little bit more back towards the Crimson Tide and or even feel between the Iron Bowl schools. And that's just par for the course, right? It's what you would expect. Bama's, spending more resources and time, in Mobile, and obviously Tank Jones is one of the first orders of business for that coaching staff. So he'll be fascinating. I do think he wants to come off the board before his senior season begins, but it means multiple trips between now and then. And of course, that will include official visits to both Alabama and Auburn. So that'll be a fascinating one. Cederian Morgan, I think, is right in there as well. Buzz, again, has shifted, right? I mean, we've heard some early Bama buzz. He went to Ohio State and crushed it last offseason at camp. And Ohio State looked like, well, they're going to get in another big Jeremiah Smith body type receiver, and it's going to be tough for anyone, to beat them out. But then Auburn has this great, we're using the freshman wide receivers year on the field. So now Auburn draws a little bit more buzz with Morgan, and now it's kind of circled back to Auburn and Bama. So I think that one's wide open. Florida's trying to get involved. The Buckeyes are in there as well. And he, in the state, might be the most fascinating prospect. I mean, you cannot teach his frame. I mean, he's listed at 6'5", 210 for us at Rivals. We just bumped him to the number one receiver in America. So this isn't just this is a nice grab between these two programs. Like, this is the number one receiver in the country. And we know how much that position has been elevated by recent NFL drafts. I mean, heck, look at this freshman class in college football with Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams and Cam Coleman and what those guys did. The onus at wide receiver, is pointed up as much as it ever has. So Morgan looks like the next big time wideout out of the state of Alabama, and naturally both of those schools are involved. So that'll be fun. Xavier Crowell's worth bringing up. He reclassed from 27 to 26, number one running back in Alabama, and arguably number one in the country coming out of Jackson High School, where he plays with Landon Duckworth. Crowell, much more of an Iron Bowl type battle. There was a dark horse named Texas for him, but Tashard Choice has since been hired by the Detroit Lions. And basically that day, within that hour, Crowell announced that he was no longer visiting Texas. So, I do think that he's going to be a little bit more conventional between Alabama, Auburn. Georgia's in there, a couple other schools as well. So it's a great group in the state of Alabama. And thankfully, we're going to get real Iron Bowl battles. I mean, you could go Zion Gibson, Jaquez Wilkes. You can go down to Vodney Cleveland, who just trimmed his list. I mean, these guys are legitimate blue chip recruits and legitimate push-pull guys between these two programs. And that's kind of how it should be.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that we're going to see Auburn, Alabama again. But like you said, very unusual last year. Alabama, I scolded them for it. You're going to hurt yourself long-term by burning some bridges here. But the state of Alabama per capita is top 10 in the nation every year for NFL players. You and I talk about that kind of number all the time. I think Georgia was number one last year, but Alabama, I think, was sixth. Why are you not going after more of these kids? Well, this year they've put a little more emphasis on it. They've already got Zion committed, and they're going after Tank. They're going after CD. This is going to be interesting. Auburn needs to live off the locals more than Alabama does. I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Sure.
So if they defeat Alabama, not only are they keeping themselves alive, they're taking it to their rival. So this will be a really interesting battle this year. A couple of the other guys that I wanted to talk to you about that I think are interesting, you and I are both interested in Jaquez Wilkes. Plays at Wadley. It's a small school. I saw him play basketball recently. He plays basketball like he plays football. Use your own imagination.
Yeah, at 6'4", 225. Yeah, he plays basketball like he plays football. That's a good one.
Probably going to be an edge rusher, but in high school, they put him at running back, and it's just a joke. They just beat up on people. Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama, A&M, Florida State. What do you like about him long-term? And if you can, because I'm not sure on it myself, what position do you like Wilkes at specifically?
Yeah, I think when you see 6'4", 225 and you know there's real athleticism there, naturally you're like, hey, put this kid's hand in the dirt or let him stand up and just let him go get the quarterback. Let him go find the football and make plays. And that's where he does spend a lot of time. He works off the ball just as much. Earlier in his recruitment, there was some tight end talk. We talked about the basketball stuff in there as well. There was some legit tight end talk because, like you said, with the running back stuff, when he does have the ball in his hands, there's a lot of natural instincts and athleticism that he shows that makes you at least think about it, right? I mean, he rushed for 300-plus yards in the state title game and broke a record as a junior as a running back. I mean, just the kid is a freaky athlete no matter where you put him. But typically when you deal with that position or with that type of build, you just kind of naturally defer to the pass rushing spot. I mean, you think of some of these freaky edge guys that have come out over the last few years, whether it's high school to college or college to the NFL. I mean, heck, Abdul Carter probably goes number one, based on what we're hearing now out of Penn State. He was that kind of guy. Micah Parsons used to take carries in high school and make people think, hey, maybe he's a running back. So I just think in this day and age, the freakier players, if they've got the build to contend near the line of scrimmage, you almost have to default there. So I do think Wilkes ends up being a pass rusher. And what becomes fascinating there is he's only done it part-time. So if he does end up, most likely somewhere in the SEC, and he actually starts training there every single day, trying to develop, it wouldn't shock many people who have seen him to think this kid, is a first-round pick in 4 years once he actually focuses on that one position. So could he become a Michael Williams type of guy and be 6'5", 265 in 3 or 4 years? Absolutely. You could see it. You could see it in his frame. And right now in his game, the floor is still high enough to where you just bring him in and figure it out later. So whether it's a true edge, it's a hybrid role between standing up and maybe even playing off the ball a little bit. He's another recruit that it's just going to get more hectic as time goes on. I mean, look at the schools you mentioned, not just an Iron Bowl guy. Georgia's heavily involved, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Florida State's trying to, pull him to the neighboring state down in Tallahassee. I mean, this is a true heavyweight battle for like the quietest, most interesting kid, maybe in the country. So it will be a very interesting one, not only where he ends up, but like you said, where he plays now and certainly going into college.
Yeah, he is a fascinating recruit. And again, he's a physical cat. I'd imagine that he's going to find himself in the front. So maybe he plays linebacker, but if I had to guess, I would say pass rusher too. I just hope he finds his niche and sticks with it because athletically, frame-wise, Wilkes is exactly what you're looking for. When we come back, we're going to talk about a sleeper in the state of Alabama, and we're also going to talk about what is the Rivals Camp, what does it do? That is next here on The Portal. John, there's a speedster from Carver High School in Montgomery that I got to see it was probably May or June. That was just super fast. Catapult, Jeff from XOS was there. He had the catapult. Kid ran like 22 something. And I was like, okay, I don't know who this is, but I'm going to find out. Because I was videoing it. They were running right at me. And it's different when you see it coming at you. And I'm like, holy crap. These kids were all pushing themselves. But when I look at receivers, I mean, you got to catch the ball. But after that, just sheer speed, especially you look at like what Ryan Williams does. And, well, Jeremiah at Ohio State, I know he's a big body and he's a true exception. But Zion Crumpton is a kid that's kind of flown under the radar. I asked you before the show, give me somebody that you think this kid could blow up. Why is it that you picked Crumpton out of – this is a pretty deep year for Alabama kids. Why Crumpton?
Look, I think we talked about it a little bit with Wilkes, but he's getting recruited at that national level. But Crumpton's one of these guys that's played everything, hasn't really settled at his future position. The difference is we know he's going to be a receiver. right? But 2 years ago, starting quarterback at Carver Montgomery. Last year rotates in at wide receiver and on the same field as a TK Norman who went to A&M and a Turbo Rogers who went to Ohio State. There were points where Zion Crumpton was the most explosive player on that roster. So I think to be in that conversation was head turning enough. And then, like you said, you start to see more and more of it. We just saw him at Battle Miami make a ton of plays, and his personality started showing on top of it, right? I mean, just legitimate ball skills and true long speed. He's long and lean, probably 6', 6'1", 175 pounds right now. And that build has people in Montgomery, and just think of this just from a pure athleticism standpoint, has people in Montgomery comparing him to Henry Ruggs, who is arguably the most explosive player to ever come out of the Montgomery area. So you're talking about a multi-sport guy, a multi-position guy who has legitimate juice, legitimate torque, when he absolutely ramps it up. So that alone, I think, creates a profile that folks will be interested in. You mentioned some of the guys who are linear speed guys who are known for that. Look at Xavier Worthy, what he just did with the Chiefs. Broke the combine record in the 40, and they just found ways to get him the football in Kansas City. And in the Super Bowl, he goes for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, just a truly explosive guy to where even when hey, this team's down, they're going to chuck it deep to this guy. It doesn't matter because he's that much faster, that much more explosive, yet he has the ball skills to finish at the end of those plays. Jameson Williams is another one up with the Detroit Lions. These guys are, used to be gadget players. These used to be returners and guys that you maybe tried to manufacture a couple touches for. But in this day and age, in the spread and pass first nature of the sport, these are guys you're manufacturing several touches for. Jet sweep, bubble screen, straight 9 route, whatever it is, get the ball in the hands of this type of player and things can happen. So I think with him being one kind of floating under the radar because of those other guys that might have been Carver Montgomery, imagine this year, those guys are gone. Turbo's at Ohio State, TK is up at A&M. It's kind of his show now. So if you talk about more volume, I think he could really do some special things as a senior. But, his recruitment is still, very much in the early stages. Florida's involved, Louisville, Mississippi State. There's some Auburn is in there to some degree. There are a lot of schools that like him, but no one's really pushing this is our number one guy. Move out of the way. We got to go all in for Zion Crumpton. And that's why I think there's room for maybe another program to come in and swipe one out of the state of Alabama. And we see it every year, prospects from the state that end up elsewhere and just make a ton of plays. I mean, go back to the Super Bowl. Reed Blankenship, huge Bama fan, never got that offer starting in the Super Bowl. Quinshon Judkins a couple years ago. Alabama never recruited him. Auburn had him in their grasps, but never really pushed. They never really secured it. Goes to Ole Miss and kills everyone as a freshman. He'll be drafted, this year. So every year there's a guy or two that sneaks out of the state that you say, man, how in the world does that happen in that state, in that football religion of a state? I think Crumpton could be that guy in this class because he's got legitimate traits that really translate anywhere.
Yeah, I still remember him and TK running. I think TK came in just ahead of him. But I was like, look, I know that guy is, but who's this one? And they're the same freaking team.
Just a year into his life as a receiver, too. So
yeah, I was just like, oh my gosh. So that's really exciting. John, last thing, since you are the guy that's directing all the rivals camps in the South, I want you to explain to people what it is, how the process works, and why it's so important for you guys to evaluate and rank players.
Yeah, well, it's twofold, right, Brian? We do the whole weekend at these locations. So we'll be March 29th and 30th in Miami and go from there. And the Saturday is a combine, and it's open to everyone. It's free. It's really hey, come here, get some verified testing data, which every school covets, right? Yes. Not only get it sent to 1 billion schools, but get a status report on yourself. Self-awareness is the most important element to a prospect being recruited, right? Because if you think you're an Alabama Auburn guy, but you're more of a, Southern Miss UAB guy, nothing wrong with that. But that awareness can cost you time, money, visits, effort, peace of mind, so many different things. So I think the Saturday Combine is great for any prospect to kind of gauge where you're at right now. It's laser focused. There's laser data. It'll give you a percentile relative to the rest of the country, 40, shuttle, broad jump, vertical, all of those things that we'll see here in a few weeks at the NFL Combine. So it's a good kind of gauge of where you're at as a prospect. And then we'll be at the Combine all day. We'll pull some of the head turning testers and say, hey, why don't you come back Sunday and compete for the actual invite only football camp? And that's obviously, pretty standard there. Linemen in the morning, getting after it, a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of competition. That's really the focus of these invite-only rivals camps, and ditto for the QBs and the skill guys when they come in. It's really an intense focus on competition. So you'll get one-on-ones, you'll get individual drills, a lot of the stuff you'll see at other events. But I think, at Rivals, what makes it cool is that we're running that show. So when it comes to seeing best on best, we might run it back 4 or 5 times, not just the one time. We're really going to dig our heels in for that evaluation and to see what some of these kids are made of, because it's great to run a 4.4. It's great to be strong or jump out of the gym and all of those things, but it becomes a football deal. How competitive are you? How consistently competitive are you? How available are you? Because we see guys trying to skip and take people's reps, and then we see guys fade into the back a little
That's
bit.
exactly right.
And, that dude's really good. I don't know if I want to go up against him, so all of those things are data points for us to focus on from an evaluation standpoint. And then, it's fun at the end of the day. It's competition. This time of year, we don't have 11 on 11 full pads. So this is sort of the next best thing, to truly find out, where some of these prospects are in their athletic journey. So yeah, Rivals camp season is basically here. LA is the first one, March 2nd. So if you're out that way, think about going to the Combine. Again, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. Just get over there. You get a shirt, you get some shorts, on there too, and you get some times, to see where you're at. And then obviously if you're invited to the camp Sunday, strap it up and go after it, man. Get after it. It's a really fun time to see where you are now and maybe what you need to work on, not only for your high school team in a few months for spring ball and the season, but, for your college prospects as well.
Absolutely. It's the way if you want to go up in the rankings, best on best is the way to go. We notice, you and I talk about it all the time, the guys that hide in the back, we see you. Yep. We see you. So.
It goes both ways, 100%.
John Garcia, tell everybody where they can find your work, brother.
Yeah, real simple. Rivals.com. We got a lot going on. Camp season's here. Still big decisions, as Brian talked about, coming around the pike, and a lot of visits getting set. So it's quiet now, but it won't stay that way.
No, it will not. And it will not stay quiet here on the portal. You can find me on Apple, Spotify. If you go to YouTube, type in LO the portal. We would like for you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. We will see you again soon here on the portal.